All right, everybody, so now we have explored how to stabilize and repair dents that could potentially oil can. Now that we've learned a little bit about that, I'm going to go ahead and put one in here that I'm going to oil can for us. So I'm going to actually get it oil canned, and at that point we're going to be using some panel strengthening techniques. Now I will tell you, I don't recommend, in fact, don't do this on retail hail damage repair cars, where people are paying full price. Now if you get somebody that comes in with something that's just hammered and they need you to fix it and they're willing to take some flaws in the panel, that's when this technique works, okay? Also, if you got a wholesale account or if you need to save one for whatever reason, this could be something that you can use in that situation. We get that quite a bit around here. We'll get people that bring in, dents that are just absolutely, fish bowled out, giant hits. I mean, to the point to where if it sat there and it rained, water would be retained in the dent for, quite a while. When you get that type of stuff, you can't make promises, things like that. You can use this technique, especially if you got a customer that's willing to settle for a little bit less than perfect. So anyhow, I'm going to jump on this panel right now, and I'm going to use the back of this PDR finesse tool to drive a dent in there, and I'm going to go ahead and oil can it. All right, everybody, so here's our dent here. In fact, it's two dents inside of one. I was afraid my first hit didn't put it in large enough to begin to oil can, but I think we can definitely make this one happen. And I'm going to show you right now typically what people do to make dents oil can. All right, everybody, so one of the major ways that folks will oil can a dent is by pushing too much metal into the circumference of the damage. So we're going to go ahead and oil can this one right here, and I'm going to do that with a soft tip tool. This is an Ultra 90 bend, and just going to begin pushing here and kind of over molding the damage. There it went. So if you see that last little tap, there it went. You can see here that the panel just pops up and down, up and down. It gets right to the threshold where you're laying it down, and it's almost flat, and bam, that's when it falls in. So you're stuck in this scenario where you either leave the dent high, which can be pretty noticeable, or you tap it and you leave it low and it's still a dent. Well, I'll tell you, in my experience, most folks, they will leave it high. However, the problem with that is, you've seen, I was like one tap away from knocking it low. Problem with that is they go through a car wash, anything affects the outside. Just normal driving could cause that dent to fall back in, and then you may have an unhappy customer. So I just want to make a note here. This technique that I'm going to show you here, as far as adding some strength back into the panel, it can only be used technically in a situation where you don't have a severe oil can. This right here, in my opinion, this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted a slight oil can. So, it literally right before it gets to that threshold where you're just almost getting ready to tap it down, it thumps in. If you get one that, you've pushed to the point to where this thing is buckling in and out and just ripping big loud sounds as it taps in and out, it's going to be tough to use any technique to stabilize that type of oil can dent. So here's what we do. We use the stability techniques. Like if you got a dent that is going to oil can no matter what you do. And that's a real threat. There are dents out there that I look at and I say, I know that thing's going to go. It doesn't matter what I do. If I use a prop rod, if I use a mini lifter, if I use any of my techniques, that dent is going to go at some point. But my idea is to use the techniques to minimize that effect. So I'm going to use that technique so we can soften the oil can. We can make it like this oil can dent right here. It works great. In fact, it could even be a little bit more severe than this oil can dent. However, when you get one that's really, really bad, just be careful with it. I mean, I've used this technique successful on some pretty bad ones. But if it goes past that threshold where the whole center of the dent's mangled up, it's nasty, it's overstretched, don't do it, you know? It's not going to work that well for you. So, but on occasion, we get these ones right here that slightly oil can, and they can be saved. Sit directly after the oil can process. I want to point something out, however. There is a little bit of an imprint in the paint. Don't really know what that is, but that's just where I decided to hit the dent in. But one of the things that I'm going to do prior to adding some strength to this panel is I need to go in here with a sharper tip and just pick up some of these holes and get this thing overall looking like a smooth dish. So rather than a dish with a bunch of divots in the center, I need to smooth that out so it's a nice and smooth low. Okay, and then at that point, we will we'll get it pushed up to the point to where it's slightly high. Then we'll be adding the strengthening plate to the back side of the panel, and I will show you how all of that works. All right, everybody, so what I have done here is basically pushed up our oil can dent into this high spot here. And we're at a threshold on this thing where as soon as you start tapping it, again, the whole thing oil cans. What I want you to notice now, at the bottom of the dent has a much more natural pattern. That's what you're looking for when you do this technique. You're going to be able to make some pushes on it when we add the stability plate. However, it's not going to be as pinpoint as you would be able to push through without it. So that's the deal. You want to clean it up, kind of smooth out the dish there, just like I was telling you about. You want a real nice pattern in the bottom of the dent that resembles the orange peel. There it is, just high. Now, if I was to go in there with a hammer and knock down and start tapping on it, as soon as it got close, as soon as it almost laid flat, just like this, bam, pops right back in. So there we have it. We'll go ahead and I'm going to show you exactly how we do this. I'm using a technique. We're actually going to be using aluminum as the panel stability plate on the underside of the panel. So I've always used 16 gauge steel. However, I'm going to be using a much thinner gauge aluminum. So this is going to be a first for me. We will test it out and see how it works. All right, everybody, so Alan is going to go ahead and trim down this aluminum. Typically, you want to cut a piece that is bigger than the circumference of the dent that's oil canning. So when it's actually in the state where it's dented and low, you want to kind of gauge how big that is and cut your panel strengthening plate here, or stability plate, and cut it. Now, what we're going to do here is grab some scotch. What we've got here is actually, if you want to bring that up to the camera, Alan, show them the package. This is 20-pound hold. This is one of the stronger outdoor mounting tape, and we'll go ahead and take that off. And what we're going to do, we're actually going to line the entire stability strengthening plate with the double-face tape. So go ahead and run strips. And you want them as close together as possible. You really don't want any gaps in between the, you want to be able to see nothing but tape on the underside. Very, very little gaps are acceptable, but just try to get them best as possible. All right, so Alan's going to go ahead and put our last strip on this aluminum, and this is 0.025. That is the gauge of the aluminum here, and so it's very, very thin, very flexible. So just to give you an idea how thin and flexible this aluminum is, there you go. Very moldable too. If you notice, I bend it and it just stays in position. Now that's one of the reasons why I'm choosing to use this instead of steel, because when we need to begin reshaping the bottom, pushing through this aluminum panel, I want that moldability. So that's why I'm hoping. I'm thinking this is not as stiff as the 16 gauge steel that I normally use. This is much thinner, but it's moldable. It just seems like it bends with whatever you do to it. So I'm hoping that this works out for us. All right, so now Alan is going to begin peeling the backside off, basically making a nice sized plate with double face adhesive on the other side. Again, this is strong, strong stuff. This is the adhesive that's designed to stick a mailbox to a brick wall and actually hold up. So it is outdoor mounting tape. So there is exactly what your plate is going to look like once you have the double face tape applicated. One of the things that you're going to notice here about this setup is that if you look at this plate and just the width of the tape from top to bottom is about the same width as the actual plate. Now where that's going to help us, that's going to aid in the process of tapping the high down. Because we've got this squishy center here, we're actually going to be able to lay the high spot right down into the tape. Now, occasionally, it's going to be so high that we need a little bit more room to play with. And that's when molding this plate along with the tape is going to come in handy. So let's jump over here and we'll get started, and I'm going to show you how to do that.